Hi everybody, this is Brian Koo with another ROK video. Barbarian chaining has always been a big part of Rise of Kingdoms. It is a great way to gain speed ups, resources, materials, experience books, and crystal tech when you're in the Lost Kingdom. For those who don't know, barb chaining is what you do when you attack one barbarian, spending some of your action points, and then you use the AoE damage of one of your commanders to target other barbarians nearby. Those barbarians will then attack you automatically. You can then defeat them without spending any action points, and if a lot of barbarians are close by, you can just chain from one barbarian to another, hopping from one target to the next and getting lots of rewards for essentially free, because all you've done is spend AP on the first barbarian that you attacked. Now, barb chaining does take a lot of time. It takes a bit of action points. It takes a bit of skill. And it takes the right commanders. And so today in this video, I am going to make a tier list of all of the best barb chaining commanders in Rise of Kingdoms in 2025. The game has added a lot of commanders recently that are very good for barb chaining, and some of them may surprise you actually. When we are talking about a good barb chaining march, we are looking for two things. We're looking for a circular AoE, which makes it much easier to target multiple barbarians. And we are looking for healing or shielding, which allows your march to stay at full health, stay out in the field for a very long time, and you're able to not only kill barbarians faster because you have more troops, but you also save time by not having to walk back to your city and refresh from time to time. Okay, so we are now here in Tier Maker, and we're going to start right at the top. We are going to talk about the very best barb chaining commanders right off the bat. First and foremost, and this might be a surprise to some people, we are going to talk about Joe Young, CY. CY is actually a great barb chaining commander. And why is that? Well, first of all, you only have to make CY 5111 to use him as a barb chaining, and he is pretty much the only commander in the game who does both things that we're looking for. He has a very, very strong heal, a mighty heal, and he does AoE damage that scales off of the size of the heal. Now, what I have heard, and thank you to some people like Michaela in the official Rise of Kingdoms Discord for this info, what I have heard is that CY's first skill heal actually does about double the healing of Richard. And so CY is great at keeping your march at full health, and he has the AoE that you're looking for that can bring in other barb chainers. Now, the AoE damage on his first skill is actually not great. It does the AoE, it pulls in the barbs, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. And so for that reason, I'm not ranking CY above any of the other top barb chaining commanders. I'm just going to put him at the top of the list along with a few others. And one of those others is Heraclius. Heraclius is the most important and most impactful garrison commander in the game. In non-artifact KVKs, Hera is part of the vast majority of garrison combos in this game, and Hera is also great at barb chaining. He does basically the same two things that CY does, right? Instead of healing, he has a mighty shield on his first skill, and so the shield prevents you from taking damage. It's very similar to a heal. It has sustain in the exact same way that a heal would sustain you. Heraclius also does an AoE. He does good damage with his AoE, and he also has a bit of counterattack damage like CY on some of his other skills. That counterattack damage just allows you to kill barbarians more quickly when several of them are attacking you at once. There is one other AoE commander that we are going to rate at S tier, and that is the great Zhuge Liang. Zhuge does a very strong AoE, circular AoE, on his first skill. He is in many ways an upgraded version of YSG, the original S tier Barb Chainer. And Zug just does everything you want. He does that circular AoE damage that you need. Now, the final two that we're going to rate at S tier are not AoE damaging commanders. They are more so commanders that you would set as the primary, and they do a bunch of things really well that make them S tier. The first one we're going to do is Huo. Huo is an excellent primary for Barb chaining, mainly because he has a giant heal every time he kills an enemy unit, and that can be either a player march or it can be a barbarian. Huo, when it kills a barbarian, will do a 3000 healing factor heal for you. That is a huge amount of sustain, and as well as that, Huo does a really big nuke on his active skill. It's a 2700 damage nuke, and because Huo is cavalry, the march also moves around the map very quickly, which is a nice thing for Barb chaining. Now, the final commander we're going to put at S tier is similar to Huo, and that is going to be Double C, another cavalry commander. Double C also has healing. He has a 10% chance to do a 500 damage factor heal every time he does a basic attack. Actually, I'm sorry, it's 100 damage factor heal every time he does a basic attack. And because he is a peacekeeping commander, Double C has a heal as part of that peacekeeping tree that gives him a 500 healing factor every time he kills a barbarian. So you can see that the healing difference between Huo and Double C is pretty significant. Huo does actually a 6 times bigger heal than Double C does when they kill another unit. I still put Double C at this tier though, because he does what you need. He's fast for cavalry. He has a nuke on his single target active skill. He does do healing, and also because he has the peacekeeping tree, he has a reduced AP cost when you're doing barbs. He spends 10 AP less per barb attack than all the other commanders here in the S tier. So Double C, he's my all-time #1 barb chaining commander. I still use him all the time, which I will get into the reasons why later. And so I will definitely say Double C is S tier, even in 2025. Now let's look at the A tier of commanders for barb chaining. I'm going to start off with a really surprising one. We're doing this list objectively, and actually, as it turns out, the first commander on the A tier is going to be Lapu Lapu. Lapu Lapu is a leadership commander that hardly anyone has built, but he does have a first skill AoE that does a circular AoE 2000 damage factor. So you could build Lapu Lapu, make him 5-1-1-1, and it would be a very, very good barb chaining march, right? Pretty similar to Hera, like does more damage but doesn't do a shield, so not as good as Hera for sure. And you would never use Lapu Lapu for anything other than barb chaining, but it's something to keep in mind, right? Now, next on this list, we're going to put YSG. YSG is the original barb chainer. You could essentially say that YSG invented barb chaining. When YSG is expertised, he does a circular AoE that does 1700 damage factor. So objectively, YSG is a worse barb chainer than Lapu Lapu, because first you have to expertise him to get the circular AoE, and second of all, you need to you do less damage with it. Now, I think other YSG skills will ultimately mean that YSG does more damage than Lapu Lapu, and so we are going to put YSG in the A tier, but do keep in mind that you have to expertise YSG to do the circular AoE, whereas other commanders on this list, all you got to do is make them 5-1-1-1. Okay, now the rest of the A tier are going to be healing commanders, and it starts off with Shajar. Shajar has a very big heal on her first skill. You can again make Shajar just 5-1-1-1. You can use her as either a primary or as a secondary behind someone like CY, for example, and she's going to give you a lot of sustain in the field. She does a bigger heal than Richard the First does, and so that's why she's here on the A tier list. But right next to her, we are going to put Richard the First. Richard, along with YSG, they are the original Barb chainers in the game. If you are a brand new player, what you will likely do first is you will build Richard to 5-1-1-1. He does a 1400 factor heal on his first skill. You can then put an AoE commander like Ethelfled or Sun Tzu behind Richard, and you can find certain situations where the fan AoE of Ethel or Sun Tzu will allow you to do a little bit of Barb chaining. And then when you expertise YSG, then you'll have the real first Barb chaining march in the game. And Richard, it still gets used. I use Richard every day to Barb chain behind Zuglang. He's got a really nice sustain, and he's just what you need. And in that same spirit, in that same sustain type spirit, we are going to put Zenobia as an A tier Barb chaining commander. Zeno has a heal on her first skill, and that's what you need. You can make her 5-1-1-1, or you can expertise her, or you might have her expertise as an old school garrison commander. And so Zeno does crack the A tier because she has that really good sustain, that really good healing that we are looking for. Now in the B tier, we're going to kick it off with another circular AoE commander. We're going with Theodora here. Theodora is another commander that only needs to be 5-1-1-1, and she does do a circular AoE with her first skill. She's ranked lower than Lapu Lapu because her AoE only does 1400 damage factor. It's going to be a little bit slower going to chain with Theodora than some of these other commanders, but she gets the job done. She has a circular AoE. She allows things to get pulled in, and yeah, she's good. Now, next up, and this one might be a little bit controversial, but at this point, we've gone through all of the circular AoE commanders in the game. They're all on the list already. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put Cyrus the Great here on the B tier. Cyrus the Great does have a circular AoE, but it is a RNG-based AoE. It is not a reliable one. Basically, every time Cyrus is attacked, there is a chance to proc his third skill, which does a circular AoE, but that is super unreliable. It does make Barb chaining a lot harder because you just don't know when that AoE is going to hit. You almost have to have the Barbs close by and just, hope the AoE hits at some point while you're attacking the first one. But I did put Cyrus in the B tier because the legendary free-to-play player 12-inch, he would use Cyrus in his 4-march Barb chaining repertoire. So if it's good enough for 12-inch, then we're going to put Cyrus in B tier, but I don't know. You could argue that he's more of a C tier one because his circular AoE is so unreliable. Now at the last commander we're going to put in the B tier is going to be Charles Martel. Charles has a really strong shield on his active skill. Again, you could make Charles 5-1-1-1. You could just slowly, build Charles up as you collect commander sculptures for him in the gold keys. I would not put gold heads into Charles to make him 5-1-1-1. I would just gradually build him and then start using him to Barb chain later on in the game. You do see a lot of people out there using Charles Martel. He's just one of those commanders that you get gold heads for him over time, and so he works pretty well as a sustain based Barb Chaining Commander. That's going to be it for the B tier. Now we've got the C tier that we're going to go with. At this point, we're really getting into the slim pickings of commanders that are useful for Barb Chaining. All of these commanders at the C tier have really significant flaws, but they can be used in a pinch. We're going to start this list off with Montezuma. Maybe he's not the best C tier one, but Montezuma has some good things going for him as far as Barb Chaining goes. First of all, Montezuma has the Peacekeeping tree, so you can get that AP discount plus the healing in the Peacekeeping tree. And Montezuma's third skill, when a target is debuffed for their health, Montezuma will heal himself. It's kind of an interesting mechanic. But if you put a concealed dagger on Montezuma and unlock and level up that third skill, every time the concealed dagger does a debuff on the barbarian target, you will get healed. And so Montezuma, if you are able to put a decent amount of gold heads into him, he works. And you have a concealed dagger, he works as a primary commander for Barb Chaining, giving you that heal that you're looking for. Now, the next one I'm going to put up here is Nevsky. I've used Nevsky a lot for Barb Chaining. He doesn't do anything special, but he is a tanky cavalry commander, so you can put somebody like YSG or Hera or even CY you could put behind Nevsky, and they'll do the AoE. Nevsky will do some damage. Nevsky will be a bit tanky, so you don't lose troops too quickly. He's not a great Barb Chaining commander, but if you're running a lot of marches, he's the kind of commander you're looking for up front, paired with a circular AoE. In the same vein and is Minamoto. You could probably put let's put Minamoto ahead of Nevsky. He's probably a little bit better for Barb Chaining. Minamoto's not tanky, but he has that Peacekeeping tree. He gets the heal from the Peacekeeping tree. He gets the sustainability, and he's cavalry, so he moves around the map really fast. Next up, we will do Ethelfled. Ethelfled, again, has the Peacekeeping tree. She has a fan AoE, and she does do extra damage to barbarians, just like Minamoto and just like Montezuma. Let's put her in front of Nevsky as well, actually. Ethelfled early in the game is going to be a commander that you do Barb Chain with. She has a very big AoE fan on her active skill, so you can pull in a decent amount of barbarians even without that circle. You could pair Ethel with somebody like Richard or with Sun Tzu, and you can do some AoE and you can get some work done very early on in the game. Next up, and for these next two commanders, we have a couple of archer commanders. These would be commanders that are very good to pair with CY, for example. You could put Boudica Prime in front of CY. CY does the AoE and the healing. Boudica gives you some extra damage for the barbarian that you're targeting. Boudica Prime also has a heal, so you're getting a lot of sustain and you're getting some damage from Boudica Prime. Other than that, she doesn't do anything special as a Barb Chainer, but sort of like Nevsky, she's just, she's better than the average bear when it comes to chaining barbarians. I'm going to throw a Herman in here as well. Herman has a nice damage on his active skill. He also does a damage debuff on his active skill. You could again pair Herman with CY. He would give you that added damage that you need with CY. CY would give you the sustainability and the circular. And yeah, I think CY Herman or Herman CY would be a good Barb Chaining march, especially if you're like an archer focused player, because a lot of this also comes down to the gear you have. The best gear set you have, that's going to be the more successful Barb Chaining march. And then finally we have Gonzalo. Shout out to Michaela for mentioning Gonzalo as someone who does do a circular AoE. I think it functions a little bit differently than some of the other AoEs. Like all the other AoEs in the game, they center around your march. I believe that when Gonzalo hits a target, it does an AoE around the target that it hits. But I think what you can do with Gonzalo is put it into a normal type of march, and you don't have to set up his range. You can just attack you can attack a barbarian with Gonzalo in there, and I believe it will do some sort of circular AoE emanating from the Barb. So I don't have Gonzalo unlocked. I was not able to try that out, but Gonzalo may be someone that you can Barb chain with. If it's someone you've built, try it out. Now, last but not least on this list, I am going to mention a couple of epic commanders. You know, early in the game, if you're trying to Barb chain, you don't have a lot of choices. Let's say, for example, you don't have Charles's first skill maxed out yet. You may be looking for somebody else to pair with, somebody like YSG or somebody like Ethelfled. And Lohar and Boudica are the two best epic commanders for Barb chaining. They have the peacekeeping tree. They both have a heal in their skill set. And so they are giving you a decent amount of sustainability, a little bit of damage, and they're giving you the peacekeeping tree. Lohar I'm ranking ahead of Boudica because Lohar's heal is bigger than Boudica's heal. But this is pretty much the list of the commanders you're going to want to use for Barb chaining in 2025, ranked in order of ability. So yeah, take a look at this list, consider what you have available to you, and now let's talk about what sort of marches we are going to construct based on how many marches you want to Barb chain with. Okay, now let's look at the ideal marches you want to use for Barb chaining. If we're doing just one march, in my opinion, the best march is going to be Huo and Hera. I really like chaining with calves. They move around the map faster, and with even a just okay set of gear, Huo Hera is going to give you everything you need. You'll kill the barbs very efficiently, and you will stay at full health just because Huo has that massive heal and Hera has that really big shield, actually multiple shields. So if it was just going to be one Barb chaining march to rule them all, I would say it is Huo and Hera. Now, if there are two, if you want to chain with two marches and you had access to all the commanders, what I would do is I would go, for my number 2 march, I would go with Zhuge Liang and CY, right? Again, you've got everything you need here. You've got damage, you've got a bunch of healing, and this is going to serve you very, very well. They're going to move around the field a little bit slower than the Huo Hera, and then they're probably going to kill barbarians a little bit slower, but honestly, this is a great 2 commander set for Barb chaining. Now, I will say, you know, I don't have CY. I have no plans to build CY. You know, I have enough Barb chaining commanders that I don't need that. I have Richard, you know, from way back in the day. And so for myself and for many people, what you would do instead of having to build CY, what you can do is you can just throw Richard behind Zhuge, and that's another like really, really good Barb chaining march, right? But we'll do it as CY for now, because we're saying in like an absolutely ideal world, what marches would we use? Now, if we went to a third Barb chaining march, I would make it double C YSG, right? Now, listen, you could say that, not Bertrand, why'd you get in there, Bert? You could say Lapu Lapu is better than YSG, and, you know, maybe for people who don't want to expertise YSG and newer players will not have a expertise YSG for long, you could argue somebody like Lapu Lapu is better. I mean, it's possible, right? Especially with the commander swaps recently, maybe like some players swapped YSG for somebody else and they no longer have YSG. Maybe you could build Lapu Lapu to 5-1-1-1 and use that as your third march. A lot of people do have a maxed YSG. I have a maxed YSG. All in all, I do think a maxed YSG is going to be better than Lapu Lapu. So for a 3-march Barb chaining setup, we're looking at this combination right here: Huo Hera, Zhuge CY, and double C YSG. Now, if we go to 4 marches, we're going to change it around a little bit. We're going to have 2 archer marches and 2 cavalry marches. We're going to put Shajar with YSG, and then we are to pair with double C. We're going to look for one of these other circular AoE commanders. We could do Lapu Lapu, or we could do Theodora. Where is Theo? There she is. Okay, we could do something like this. Now, the other thing you can do at a spot like this, right? The other thing you can do here, because it's not really realistic to be putting gold heads into, you know, Theo and Lapu Lapu and stuff. You can move CY down to either Shajar or double C, because CY doesn't need to be archers. CY will do his AoE with any troop type. So you could do double C CY. I think what makes more sense, though, is Shajar and CY, double C and YSG, and then throw somebody like Richard or Zeno behind Zug Lang. Because Zug gives you the circular AoE, you don't need to double up with CY necessarily, although that would be optimal. So for a 4-march setup, this is something that I think is quite realistic. Here, you're just building Shajar and CY to 5111. You're expertising YSG, 511 on Richard, 511 on Hera. That's fine too. So this is a pretty realistic setup that you have here if you wanted to do 4 Barb chaining marches at once, which by the way is a ton. I mean, that's about as far as you can go. But let's go ahead and think about what we could do if we did a 5 chaining march setup. With that, we would have to go with the Lapu Lapu. Let's put the Lapu Lapu with the Richard, and we could put Zenobia behind Zug. We could potentially put someone like Herman behind Zug. You don't have the and we could put Zenobia behind Zug. We could potentially put someone like Herman behind Zug. You don't have the sustain at this point, and so this march will die at some point, but it's going to be an okay Barb chaining march. Again, this is an ideal world, so we'll put the Zeno here behind Zug. Again, you have 5 circular AoEs. You have healing on all 5 of these marches. This is a pretty crazy setup right here. A bunch of 511 commanders. You're really not maxing too many other than YSG, other than Huo, other than Zug. And somewhere along the way, you're probably going to expertise double C as well. But yeah, this would be a pretty sick 5-march Barb chaining setup. I don't recommend it. That's a lot of things to pay attention to. But if you're like really good with your hotkeys and stuff like that, hey, maybe it's possible. So I hope that my tier lists and my commander pairings are helpful to you as you figure out what the best Barb chaining marches are for your account. I will say a lot of it comes down to personal preference. Even though I rated Huo Hera as the #1 Barb chaining march, I actually run double C Hera in the field instead. I have really good cav gear. I'm in KVK right now. My crystal tech is boosted, and my double C Hera kills barbarians so fast that it's actually a little bit suboptimal, and I probably have longer chains with my ZL Richard. If I were to use Huo instead of double C, they would just nuke down barbarians even faster. It wouldn't be any better for me. And so I just choose to use double C instead. I get an AP discount, and I'm able to chain a little bit more effectively than the Huo. If you're someone who's a newer account and you're trying to chain barbs in Home Kingdom without the benefit of Crystal Tech, you might want to just go with the absolute strongest march. If you're much more advanced, you might want to go with more peacekeeping commanders, get some of that AP discount. Regardless of what you do, I do wish you the best of luck in your barb chaining adventures. It's something I enjoy doing. I do get a lot of value out of it. I save money, and hopefully this video was helpful for you as you rack up those barbarian kills. If it was helpful, please throw a like on the video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I do want to see how successful a video like this is. This is more of a how-to guide type of video. If it's successful, I will make more of them. Appreciate all the subs from people. Lots of great Rise of Kingdoms content on this channel coming in the future. So yeah, thank you for all the support. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my list or if you think I'm crazy to put Lapu Lapu so highly. Hey, you know, I just call them like I see them. And until next time, I will see you all on the flip side.